Hi, everyone. Welcome to Interchange. I'm Dan Jones. I'm glad you can join us. I think you'll like the discussion today. There are reports that the city of Milwaukee may just ignore and legally challenge the new law which does away with residency requirements for public employees. We will also talk about gay marriage, and we'll talk about whether TV cook Paula Deen should be crucified for the racist comments she made. We will also discuss a new report that claims Wisconsin has some of the dirtiest beach water in the country. All right, let me introduce everybody. We have longtime newspaper columnist Joel McNally. You know Kevin Fischer, former broadcast journalist, political analyst. Oftentimes you hear him as a fill-in host over on WISN Talk Radio. You've met Avi Lank, longtime Milwaukee business reporter, now an essayist for UWM Public Radio. And of course, Gerard Randall, education consultant, job creation expert, and the new chairman of Milwaukee's Social Development Commission Board of Directors. Rick Horowitz will be along with commentary at the end of the show. All right, first, let's talk about the residency rules which force public employees in Milwaukee and some other cities to live in the cities where they work. The budget that Governor Walker signs into law on Sunday will do away with those rules, which have been on the books for nearly 75 years. The Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel reports that Milwaukee aldermen will vote next week to instruct employees to ignore the law and ask the city attorney to begin a legal challenge. Okay, so if I'm a cop or a firefighter who was going to put my house on the market and move to the suburbs this summer, what the heck am I supposed to do now?
Wait. If you're talking about the city's challenge being based on the notion that home rule, which has been in effect for better than 75 years, then I think the city has a strong case. And frankly, the Supreme Court should decide whether or not this falls under the state's capacity to direct communities to either set residency rules or avoid setting residency rules. On the other hand, I think it creates some additional turmoil regarding how the city is going to set its budget, whether or not this is going to be enforceable. I think it opens up a whole lot of individual lawsuits that will, litigation that will take place. So I don't know if this is going to do anything other than keep lawyers busy. I don't know that the legislature is going to feel any less resolve in pushing this issue through. They go into recess. So there's going to be time that's against the city, and there's also going to be cost that's against the city in pushing this.
Avi, how much do you think is a mayor and a common council who don't like this governor at all just pushing back?
Well, obviously there's some of that in it. But, you know, if the city thinks it has a case, it ought to get litigated. And I agree with Gerard, you know, if you're a public employee and you move out of the city and the council has said we're going to challenge this, probably do so at your own peril. I'm not a lawyer, but I would assume there's two ways you could get it into court. One is you could just sue to say it isn't right, or you could probably go after some employee who moved out of the city when you said they weren't supposed to, and then that person, I suspect, if they're a fireman or policeman anyway, or firefighter or police officer anyway, backed by their union, would have to try and defend what they did. But it would certainly add a whole bunch of uncertainty to life, and if you've worked for the city for a dozen years and you want to move, wait till this whole thing gets resolved. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know whether it might get resolved, but certainly when this was forced upon the city, they have to find a way, and they don't want it, they have to find a way of doing everything they can to try and stop it. And this certainly seems to be a logical thing for them to do.
Kevin, the legal challenges to Act 10 have gone on forever and ever and ever. Do you see the same thing happening here? Are we going to be talking about this a year from now?
I don't think so. I mean, the law is the law, and you can't stand in the corner and stomp your feet and stick your thumb in your mouth and say, well, this is the law, but I just don't like it, so I'm just going to ignore it. That's ill-advised and foolish. I'm not a lawyer either, but my strong belief is that you will take this to court and you will lose. You will lose, and you will lose big, and that you're going to rack up huge costs that you're going to pile on later on. So I'm not sure that's a very wise, prudent move on the part of the city. And if I'm a police officer or firefighter, and I would like to move out of the city within that 15-mile radius, I would say don't wait. I would say do it now, because I think the odds are in your favor that this residency law is going to stand up. And especially with interest rates going up now, they're at 4.5%, going to be at 5% pretty soon. I would say, go for it now. Buy your house, because I don't see the city winning in this. It's the law. You have to obey it. It's just because I don't like it, I'm going to tell my police and firefighters to just no. You can't move. What are you going to do if they do move? You're going to fire them. That now you risk endangering public safety to boot.
Kevin,
the city is crazy.
Courts invalidate laws all the time, Kevin.
Is Tom Barrett obligated to do this?
I think so.
Yeah, perhaps, yes.
Absolutely. The truth of the matter is, it's not the law just because the legislature says so. Half the laws that the legislature passed last session, have been challenged, and a number of them, voting and destroying unions,
by Dane County
are held up in court by judges. That's what the judicial system does, is determine whether laws that were passed were legal or not, or constitutional or not. And truthfully, the fact that, Act 10, as you say, is still in the courts because judges have held it up as unconstitutional, it's not even determined that was legitimate. That destroyed all kinds of bargaining rights. What this law, the residency law, does is the state legislature and the governor reaching into the city of Milwaukee's labor negotiations and saying, we think that, the police and the firefighters, they ought to get what they want in this labor negotiation.
Like residency requirements.
That's not the point. The point is you have an outside body reaching in to try to run a city that they have no control over. The mayor and the common council do the labor negotiating. They decide what the laws are in the city of Milwaukee. You don't have the state coming in and saying, we can tell the city of Milwaukee what to do because we don't like the kind of people who live in the city.
They did, and you have detractors of the governor and the legislature who, every time they pass something, and they were put in by the people. All right, the people put in a Republican legislature and a Republican governor.
Not a majority of the people didn't.
The majority of the people voted for Democrats, in fact.
Every time their detractors don't like something, they run to a Dane County liberal judge to try to get it overturned.
There are all kinds of judges in Dane County, just like there are all kinds of judges all over the state. And the best judges are the ones that try to follow the law. Unfortunately, the Wisconsin State Supreme Court is a partisan court, and that's what you guys are counting on to uphold all kinds of illegal acts.
All right, next topic. The Supreme Court ruled this week that married gay couples are indeed entitled to federal benefits, and then refused to decide a California case which in effect keeps same-sex marriages legal there. These are huge victories for supporters of gay marriage, but it's still only legal in 12 states and Washington, D.C. So, Gerard, what happens now, do you think?
More litigation. That seems to be the theme of the show tonight. First off, in those states, the 38 states where it's not permitted, there's only maybe a half dozen states where there's a likely chance that gay marriage might be approved. Illinois is one of those half dozen states. It failed there primarily because African-American pastors lobbied their educated their legislators, and so it didn't pass. They'd be quick to tell me that they're not lobbyists. On the other hand, I think it's going to end up in the Supreme Court again because of some of the challenges around how the federal government, primarily the U.S. Attorney General, decides on some of the nuances of the Supreme Court's decision. For example, is the decision based on whether or not you are married in a state that permits marriage, or what happens if you move to a state that doesn't? Are you still entitled to benefits? These are the kinds of things which I think are going to be interpreted by the U.S. Attorney General and makes the ruling again something that ultimately could lead it back into the courts. The final thing that I want to say is courts didn't decide on whether or not marriage between two same-sex couples is right or not. And something tells me that at some point that's going to end up back into the courts as well.
Do we need a constitutional amendment that either gay marriage is permitted in the United States or it isn't?
No, I don't think we need a constitutional amendment. We need a court with guts The only problem with this decision was it didn't go far enough. And I'll put this in terms that Kevin and Gerard and our governor can understand.
Oh, thank you for being so condescending.
Well, you're welcome. This puts Wisconsin at a tremendous disadvantage in the rush for jobs. Right now, if a corporation hires a gay employee in Iowa, and after the 1st of August in Minnesota, and probably fairly soon in Illinois, they're going to get all the tax benefits of a married couple, all right? Which means their federal taxes are going to be a lot lower, and they're not going to be taxed on health insurance premiums if they're provided for them. Wisconsin, because we will not recognize such marriages, is going to pay that employee less or cause its employer to pay him more. And if you are someone making an economic development decision, should you put your factory or your headquarters in Milwaukee or Minneapolis or Des Moines, we've just put a huge, huge, huge boulder in the way of economic progress in this state.
But for most lawmakers,
forget that, in my opinion, it's the right thing. I was married in Ohio, and the state of Wisconsin has always recognized my marriage. I don't know why if I'd been married in Iowa, they'd have done the same thing. And I don't know why it should be different if my spouse were a man.
For most lawmakers, this is not an economic issue.
No, but it is an economic issue. It's a big one.
It's a constitutional issue, and the Supreme Court now says you have to recognize equality. I disagree with Gerard entirely that the decision leaves open whether equality is the rule in America. In fact, the major decision said just that the only reason to deny benefits to married same-sex couples would be animus toward homosexuals as a group of people. And the court said you can't do that. And that, you don't need a constitutional amendment. Our Constitution says people have equal rights under the law, and the Supreme Court now says this has to be applied to same-sex marriages. I do agree with Avi that the court was a little gutless by not going all the way and saying equal rights in America mean equal rights. It's going to be done on a state-by-state basis. Wisconsin is going to be left behind by all the states that now, with a lot of momentum, are going to move toward marriage equality, because that clearly is coming, and everyone knows it's coming. And unfortunately, Wisconsin, which used to be on the forefront of progressive change, is now being left behind, and that's an embarrassment.
Does this make you think that the court was progressive?
No, the court punted.
No, they didn't. They didn't.
If they
They allowed same-sex marriage in another state. A third of the population in the United States now allow same-sex marriage.
38 states do not.
A third of the population.
38 states do not. To quote the liberal mayor of Madison, Dave Sislevich, this was a clean double up the middle. Victories, yes, but it wasn't the home run that advocates wanted. They wanted to have bans on same-sex marriage thrown out completely. I think this is a states' right issue. It may be a while before it gets back to the high court, but it should be a states' right issue. Let the people decide.
Civil rights have never been states' rights issues except on racial issues, and we found out what happens if you leave it the individual
and let me
states.
just quickly add. Let me quickly add this.
Civil rights cannot be left to have people treated equally in one part of the country.
I know we're out of time, and you're trying to monopolize it. DOMA simply codified an aspect of traditional marriage that has been accepted by all societies since the beginning of time. That's all it did.
That's not true. That's not true.
It was approved by Democrats in Congress and Bill Clinton, a Democrat president, and now suddenly they flip-flop, proving the hypocrisy of the left.
All right, next topic.
You've lost.
Let's talk for a few minutes about popular TV cook Paula Deen. She lost her TV show, a bunch of other endorsement deals with Target, Sears, when it came to light this past week that she said a few racist things like using the N-word, and that she talked about planning a plantation wedding with black waiters and everything. Is she getting what she deserves, or is this an overreaction by a super sensitive, politically correct society?
You know what? I think she put herself in the arena of, as a public figure, whose words and actions are always being watched, imitated, denounced. And her reaction based on these court reports, and I read what the question was, and then read what her response was. And when she said, as was reported, of course, I was kind of taken aback by that, because she didn't in any kind of way try to soften what may have been her use of the word or put it in some kind of better context. And I think it was just the raw answer that she gave that lost me as a supporter who may have given her the benefit of the doubt.
Is she a product of her upbringing, her environment, the South, and the attitudes of the South, or is she just an idiot?
Well, no, she's not an idiot, and she is a product of the Jim Crow South. That's not an excuse, though. I think, disclaimer: no one here condones what she did or what she said or the use of that word, but she didn't blurt it out on live television. She didn't say it in a private conversation that was secretly recorded. She didn't even say it recently. She said it 30, maybe more years ago.
No, that's the problem.
All right, and she said it
within the decade.
And she said it after she had been held up when she was working at a bank by a black man when she got home and talked about it with her husband. I think you're innocent till proven guilty in this country. I think this is an overreach. There's a larger, more disturbing issue here, and that is if we can disqualify someone for a single indiscretion, that is very ugly and that's destructive. I think she deserves to be held innocent until proven guilty. And my goodness gracious, fine, short run, all these large companies are dumping her and so forth. I think that we should wait and see how this plays out. This lawsuit was filed by a white woman, not a black individual, that worked on one of her restaurants. She worked there 5 years. Apparently, it wasn't a real horrible working environment if she stayed there 5 years. I think that she's being unfairly treated here.
But the reality is different rules apply when you're a public figure.
Yeah, this is a woman who is selling image. That's what she sells. And fame can be fickle. You know, if what you're selling is a smiley face, keep smiling. And don't go, watch what you do. Now, whether or not she might come back, who knows? Martha Stewart lied to the FBI, went to jail, and she's back.
I like Martha.
Well, but
Tiger Woods.
Well, but
I like Tiger.
We don't know how it's all going to play out, but I don't have a lot of sympathy for her because she was only selling fluff anyway.
Does she deserve forgiveness?
I don't know what she deserves. I don't know if she deserved to be the most famous woman in the world. All she does is make over calorie dishes and try to stuff them down people's throats. She's an entertainer, and let's be clear about who did what. These were companies that did this because they want to sell products to everybody, to all races of people, to everyone in America, and they don't want someone who's supposed to be representing them to insult their customers. And why should they? It's got nothing to do with political correctness. These are some of the biggest corporations and networks in America who are making business decisions because you can't sell things to people you call names.
Well, then if you're going to can Bill Maher and Al Sharpton for some of the things they've said
they
too.
sell different images.
Right.
She sold a different image.
Racism.
Everyone likes that.
Next topic. A report by an environmental watchdog group said this week that Wisconsin lakefront beaches are the second worst in the entire nation. When it comes to water quality, it said South Shore Beach in Milwaukee was one of the worst in the world. Now, some local officials are saying the only reason our numbers are so bad is because we've been so much more diligent in the constant testing, more so than the rest of the country. So, of course, we're going to have more violations because we test more. But others are pointing their fingers again at the years and years of sewer overflows in Milwaukee being dumped into Lake Michigan. Who do you blame?
Well, let's get rid of the sewer overflow stuff in this particular report right away. It was based on data from last year, and last year there may have been 2. I think there was only 1 sewer overflow. We're talking about South Shore Beach. South Shore Beach has some peculiar characteristics. One is that there is an extremely large storm sewer outlet that empties into South Shore Beach. And while theoretically storm sewer water is the rain, just the rain that comes down, we know it collects a lot of stuff before it gets in there, even without any unwanted infiltration from sanitary sewers. It's also a very developed area where things come down in there, and sort of the icing on the cake on that is that there's a breakwater there, which makes it a little harder for the water to circulate in and out like it does at some other beaches. The sewage district sometimes talks about seagulls. I've never really, there's a lot of bad stuff in seagull poop, but there's seagulls at every beach. But there are peculiar characteristics of South Shore Beach that probably go a long way to explaining this. And hopefully, I suspect if we really want to find out, we should move that storm sewer outflow and see what happens.
What about all the other Lake Michigan beaches?
Drive an hour from here up to Sheboygan and stand on the shore of Lake Michigan. It's pretty clean.
Polar Andre did not get really good marks in that report either. I'm sorry.
I'm not discounting the millions of gallons of raw sewage we dump into.
It did not happen that year,
okay?
Kevin.
You dump all that crap into the lake, it's going to have an effect. It's not the only culprit, all right? Having said that, you've got flowage off concrete surfaces into the lake. You have sanitary sewers leaking into storm sewers. You do have birds and other wildlife that have an effect. So I think the solution is, I don't think you're going to do the real solution, and that is separate the sewers, because that would be extremely expensive and it would take a lot of time and would probably be an argument that would last longer than the Miller Park debate. But you know where the problems are? Clean up those beaches, and until you get them clean, shut them down. You don't want to endanger
Here
public
in Milwaukee
safety.
for years, people have said, I would never go on the water. Do you agree?
No, well, I won't because it's too damn cold. But the truth of the matter is, the sewerage district are the good guys.
That's right.
They're the
Thank you,
ones that are
Joel.
cleaning stuff up. They're the ones that are promoting rain gardens and rain barrels. Right-wing radio always uses the sewerage district as a whipping boy, and I've never understood them. I absolutely have not. These are the good guys. The only thing they can make it maybe by spending billions of dollars more, they can make it slightly more cleaner. But the truth of the matter is, they're the ones that have created the fact that very high-end condos are being built on the South Shore and the river, and it's because the water is cleaner because of what they've done.
All right, we continue. Well, big doings on Capitol Hill this week as the Senate gave strong approval to a comprehensive immigration reform bill. Prospects are a lot shakier on the House side, and plenty of people in Washington and elsewhere still find the changing face of the country a little unsettling. All the hubbub, meanwhile, has put Rick Horowitz in a reminiscing mood. Rick.
There are times I wish I could draw, could be a cartoonist. Right now is one of those times. If I could draw, I'd draw one of those anti-immigration rallies you see on the news from time to time. And I'd have the crowd chanting, "Take our country back, take our country back." Except that the people doing the chanting would be Apache and Navajo and Algonquin and Seminole. You may have noticed the people at the rallies have a somewhat different vision of the country they're so hot to take back. They generally mean the country the way it looked 5 minutes after they got here. It's a perfectly human reaction, but perfectly wrong, or so it seems to this descendant of immigrants. My grandparents, they came from somewhere else. In their case, Russia, Poland, depending on who was drawing the border that year. They lived in America for decades, and they spoke English only when they had to, which wasn't very often. But my parents, they spoke English right from the get-go. And my parents' kids, we seem to have picked up a few English words along the way, too. That's how it works. This isn't new. Same with the fuss about immigrant head coverings and scarves and such. I think of pictures of New York at the turn of the 20th century. Those folks, my grandparents and the folks who got off the boat with my grandparents, they always had their heads covered for religious reasons. This isn't new, but we forget. My mother, back when she was still alive, my mother was living in a senior community in Florida, and she told me about a conversation she'd heard there. A couple of the ladies were complaining about the clerks in some store talking among themselves and all speaking Spanish. The ladies were very distressed. Why can't it be like the old days, one of the ladies wondered. Back in the old days, back in New York, you could walk into a store and the guy behind the counter would be speaking Yiddish. The way it's supposed to be.
Not my age.
Thank you, Rick, and thank you so very much for watching. We'll be off next week because of the holiday. Enjoy the weekend and enjoy your 4th of July.